There's a quiet shift that happens the moment you retire. It's not loud, there's no alarm bell, no flashing sign telling you everything has changed, but everything has changed. For decades, your life was built around accumulation, earning, saving, growing, pushing forward. Every paycheck had a purpose, every investment had time on its side, even mistakes had the luxury of recovery. And then one day you step into retirement, and suddenly the rules are different. Now it's no longer about how much you can grow. It's about how long what you've built can last. It's no longer about maximizing return. It's about preserving control. Stability begins to matter more than speed. Flexibility matters more than perfection. And this is where many retirees quietly get it wrong, because most people walk into retirement thinking the game is still about performance, about picking the right stocks, timing the market, or chasing the next opportunity. But after years of working closely with retirees, some thriving, others struggling, I've noticed something profound. Retirement success is not defined by return. It's defined by resilience. It's defined by how well your life holds together when things don't go as planned. Because things will not go as planned. Markets will fall, expenses will rise, health will change, priorities will shift. And in those moments, what determines whether your retirement feels calm and controlled or reactive and fragile is not what you earn, but what you've built underneath your plan. That's what this conversation is really about. Not flashy investments, not stock picks, but the foundational assets that quietly protect your independence, your flexibility, and your ability to stay in control for the next 20, 30, even 40 years. These are the assets that most retirees overlook, yet they are often the difference between confidence and constant worry. So today, I want to walk you through 6 of the most important assets you should consider putting in place immediately once you retire. Not later, not someday, but right now, because these are the assets that give you breathing room, clarity, and peace of mind. Let's start with the first one. Asset number 1, the invisible shield, personal liability, umbrella policy. This one is simple, almost too simple, and because of that, it's often ignored. But make no mistake, this may be one of the most important protections you ever put in place. A personal liability umbrella policy isn't exciting. It doesn't grow. It doesn't produce income. It won't show up on your investment statement. But what it does is protect everything else. Think about where you are right now. At this stage of life, you've likely accumulated meaningful assets. Your home, your savings, your retirement accounts. These aren't just numbers. They represent decades of work, discipline, sacrifice. They represent your freedom. But here's the uncomfortable truth. As your wealth grows, so does your exposure. Not exposure to market risk, that's obvious, but exposure to something far more unpredictable, legal liability, a car accident, someone slipping on your property, a situation where you're found legally responsible, even partially, for damages. These things don't just happen to other people. They happen quietly, unexpectedly, and often at the worst possible time. And without the right protection, they can put everything you've built at risk. This is where an umbrella policy comes in. Think of it exactly like the name suggests, an umbrella. You already have homeowners insurance. You already have auto insurance, but those policies have limits. An umbrella policy sits on top of them, extending your coverage, often by 1 million, 2 million or more, for a relatively small annual cost. We're not talking about thousands of dollars here. In many cases, this protection costs less than what you might spend on a nice dinner each month. And what you're doing, in essence, is incredibly powerful. You're taking a potentially catastrophic, unpredictable financial risk and turning it into a fixed, manageable expense. That's it. You're buying peace of mind, but it goes deeper than that. For many retirees, their home is their largest asset. And it's not just a place to live, it's a strategic asset. It might fund a future downsizing move. It might provide liquidity later in life. It might become a key part of your long-term care plan. So protecting it isn't just about avoiding loss, it's about preserving your future options. Because retirement isn't just about what you know today, it's about protecting the flexibility to adapt tomorrow. And that's exactly what this first asset does. It quietly stands in the background, shielding everything else you've worked so hard to build. Asset number two, the missing link, your taxable brokerage account. Now let's talk about something that most retirees don't realize they're missing until it's too late. When people think about retirement savings, they usually think in two buckets. There's the traditional IRA, the workhorse, the account you draw income from. Every withdrawal is taxed, every dollar counts. Then there's the Roth IRA, the long-term engine, the account you try not to touch, the one designed for growth, for later years, or even for legacy. Two buckets, income now and income later. But there's a gap between them, and that gap is where flexibility lives. This is where the taxable brokerage account comes in. And I like to think of it as the missing middle, because retirement doesn't happen in neat, predictable lines. Life happens in the middle, unexpected expenses, opportunities, moments that matter, helping a child or grandchild, taking that trip you've been putting off for years, replacing a car, renovating your home, saying yes to something meaningful. And when those moments come, the last thing you want is to feel financially constrained. Here's why this account matters so much. When you withdraw money from a traditional IRA, every dollar is taxed as ordinary income, no flexibility, no nuance. But in a taxable brokerage account, you're typically only taxed on the gain, not the full amount you withdraw. And if those gains are long-term, they're often taxed at a lower rate. That difference might seem small on paper, but in practice, it gives you options. And options are everything in retirement, because this account becomes your pressure release valve. It allows you to access money without dramatically increasing your tax burden. It gives you room to make decisions without feeling boxed in. It lets you respond to life instead of reacting to your tax situation. And that's a powerful shift. It's not flashy. You won't see commercials advertising it. No one talks about it at dinner parties. But quietly, behind the scenes, this account becomes one of the most useful tools in your financial life. If your IRA is your today money and your Roth is your future money, then your brokerage account is your life happens money. And that's the kind of flexibility that can transform how retirement feels. Asset number three, your most undervalued guarantee, strategic Social Security, longevity insurance. There's an asset you already own. You didn't buy it recently. You've been contributing to it for decades. It's quietly sitting in the background waiting for you. And yet, it's one of the most misunderstood and misused assets in retirement. That asset is Social Security. Now, when most people think about Social Security, they ask one simple question: when can I start taking it? And that question makes sense. After all, you've earned it. You've paid into the system your entire working life. There's a natural desire to start receiving those benefits as soon as possible. But that question, while understandable, is incomplete. Because a more powerful question is this: how can I use Social Security to protect the rest of my life? That shift in thinking changes everything. Because Social Security isn't just income, it's insurance. Specifically, it's longevity insurance, protection against one of the biggest financial risks in retirement, outliving your money. Here's how it works. For every year you delay claiming benefits beyond your full retirement age, up until age 70, your benefit increases significantly. Not just a little, meaningfully. And on top of that, those benefits are adjusted for inflation. So what you're doing when you delay isn't just waiting. You're buying a larger, more durable income stream for the rest of your life. And if you're married, this becomes even more important. Because the larger of the two benefits typically becomes the survivor benefit. So when one spouse passes, the surviving partner continues with the higher income, which means a decision you make today doesn't just affect you. It affects the financial stability of someone you love, possibly decades into the future. Now, let's be honest. Delaying Social Security can feel uncomfortable. It means relying more heavily on your portfolio in the early years of retirement. It means patience. It means trusting a long-term strategy over short-term comfort. But that discomfort is often where the value lives, because what you're doing is incredibly intentional. You're shifting income from your early retirement years, when you're more flexible, to your later years, when stability matters most. You're building a financial foundation for your 80s and 90s, not just your 60s. And that's where many retirement plans quietly fall apart, not at the beginning, but later, when uncertainty grows and options shrink. So instead of asking, how quickly can I take Social Security? Ask yourself, how can I use this to create the strongest possible foundation for the rest of my life? Because when used strategically, this isn't just a benefit. It's one of the most powerful financial assets you'll ever have. Asset number 4, buying time, the retirement runway. If there's one concept that changes everything in retirement, it's this: time matters differently now. When you were working, time was your greatest ally. Markets went up, markets went down, but it didn't matter as much. You were contributing, you were accumulating. You had years, sometimes decades, to recover from downturns. But in retirement, time becomes more fragile because now you're withdrawing. And that introduces a risk that many people underestimate: the sequence of returns. You don't need to remember the term, but you need to understand the impact. If the market performs poorly in the early years of your retirement while you're actively withdrawing money, it can do significantly more damage than if those same poor returns happen later. Why? Because you're selling assets when they're down. And once that money is gone, it's gone. You don't get a second chance to let it recover. This is where the concept of a retirement runway becomes essential. Think of it like this. Instead of relying on your investment portfolio for your next paycheck, you create a separate pool of money designed specifically to fund your lifestyle for the next 2 to 5 years, not months, years. This isn't your emergency fund. This is intentional, strategic, purpose-built. This runway is typically held in stable, accessible assets, things that aren't exposed to the same level of volatility as the stock market: cash equivalents, short-term bonds, a structured mix of conservative holdings that prioritize stability over growth. And what this does, quietly but powerfully, is change your entire experience of retirement. Because now, when the market drops, you don't panic, you don't react, you don't feel pressure to sell because your next paycheck isn't coming from the market. It's already sitting there waiting for you, month after month, year after year. That changes how you think. It changes how you behave. It gives you space. And in retirement, space is incredibly valuable. It allows you to make thoughtful decisions instead of emotional ones. It allows your long-term investments to recover naturally without interference. It allows you to stay aligned with your plan, even when the world feels uncertain. And let's be honest, the world will feel uncertain. There will always be headlines, economic fears, global tensions, moments that make you question whether you should do something. But when you have a runway, you've already done something, you've prepared, you've given yourself time. And time in retirement is one of the most powerful assets you can own, because without it, you're forced to react. And reactivity, especially in financial decisions, is often where costly mistakes are made. Asset number 5, designing your future. Aging in place upgrades. There's a question most people don't ask themselves early enough in retirement. How long do I actually want to stay in this home? Not just emotionally, but practically. Because your home isn't just a place you live. It's a central piece of your retirement experience. It influences your independence, your comfort, your daily routines, even your long-term financial plan. And yet, many people treat their home as static, as something that will naturally continue to serve them the same way it always has. But the reality is, your needs will change, not overnight, but gradually, subtly. And the smartest retirees don't wait for those changes to force decisions. They prepare for them in advance. This is where aging in place upgrades come in. Now, this doesn't mean turning your home into a hospital. It doesn't mean sacrificing style or comfort. What it means is making thoughtful, intentional improvements today that extend your independence tomorrow. Small changes can have a massive impact. A walk-in, curbless shower instead of a high step, better lighting to reduce fall risk, handrails that are actually secure, not decorative, lever-style door handles that are easier to use over time, moving laundry from the basement to the main floor, installing subtle support features in key areas like bathrooms and hallways. Individually, these upgrades might seem minor, but collectively, they can add years of independence to your life. And that's not just a lifestyle benefit, it's a financial one, because long-term care is expensive, very expensive. Assisted living can easily cost tens of thousands per year, and the longer you can safely remain in your home, the more you preserve both your finances and your autonomy. So think about it this way. If you invest a relatively modest amount into your home today, and it allows you to stay there just 1 or 2 years longer than you otherwise would, that's not just an upgrade, that's a return on investment. But more importantly, it's a return on your quality of life, because most people don't dream about moving into assisted living. They dream about staying where they feel comfortable, where memories live, where life feels familiar. And when you invest in your home with intention, you're not just improving a space, you're extending a chapter of your life. Asset number 6, the one asset that touches everything, your health span. There's one asset that quietly influences every other decision you'll make in retirement. It doesn't sit in your portfolio. You won't find it on a statement. You can't track it with a ticker symbol. And yet, it determines how you experience everything you've worked so hard to build. That asset is your health span, not just how long you live, but how well you live. Because there's a difference between adding years to your life and adding life to your years. And in retirement, that difference becomes incredibly real. You can have a perfectly structured financial plan. You can have enough saved. You can have your income mapped out, your risks managed, your assets diversified. But if your physical capacity begins to decline faster than expected, everything else starts to shift. Your independence changes, your lifestyle narrows, your choices become more limited, and your financial plan, no matter how well designed, begins to absorb costs it was never meant to carry. This is why investing in your health span is not optional, it's foundational. Now, this doesn't mean chasing perfection. It doesn't mean becoming someone you're not. It means making consistent, intentional choices that protect your ability to move, function, and live independently for as long as possible. Because one of the most significant predictors of independence as we age is something surprisingly simple: muscle. There's even a clinical term for its decline, sarcopenia. And while it may sound technical, the reality is very human. Over time, without deliberate effort, we lose strength, we lose balance, we lose resilience. And those losses don't just show up in a gym, they show up in daily life: getting up from a chair, climbing stairs, carrying groceries, recovering from a fall. These are the moments that quietly determine whether you remain independent or begin to rely on others. So what does it look like to invest in your health span? It's not complicated, but it does require intention. Strength training, simple, consistent resistance exercises. Mobility work, keeping your joints functional and your body moving freely. Preventative care, staying ahead of issues instead of reacting to them. It might be as simple as using resistance bands at home, a single kettlebell, a weighted vest during walks, or even working with a trainer, not for intensity, but for accountability, because consistency matters more than intensity, and progress matters more than perfection. Now, here's where it gets even more powerful. When you invest in your health span, you extend your financial lifespan. You reduce the likelihood of costly medical interventions. You delay or avoid the need for assisted living. You maintain the ability to do the things you enjoy, travel, spend time with family, stay active in your community, and perhaps most importantly, you preserve your sense of autonomy because independence isn't just about money. It's about capability. It's about waking up each day knowing you can live your life on your own terms. And that's something no portfolio alone can provide. If you want to take it a step further, consider tracking your progress. Tools like body composition scans, whether through DEXA or similar technologies, can give you real insight into how your body is changing over time, not to obsess over numbers, but to stay aware, to stay engaged, to stay in control. Because just like your finances, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed improves. Bringing it all together, what really makes a retirement work. When you step back and look at these 6 assets, something becomes clear. None of them are flashy, none of them are designed to impress, and none of them will ever be the topic of a trending conversation. But together, they form something incredibly powerful, a foundation, a structure that supports not just your finances, but your life. Let's take a moment to reflect on what you've built. You've protected your wealth from unexpected risks with a liability shield. You've created flexibility through a brokerage account that adapts with your life. You've strengthened your future income by using Social Security as longevity insurance. You've bought yourself time with a retirement runway that removes pressure and panic. You've extended your independence by investing in your home, and you've preserved your ability to enjoy it all by investing in your health. Each of these assets does something slightly different, but together they accomplish something far more important. They reduce fragility. Because the truth is, retirement doesn't fail because of one big mistake. It usually unravels through a series of small vulnerabilities, a lack of flexibility here, a forced decision there, a moment of panic, an unexpected cost, a gradual loss of independence. And over time, those small cracks begin to add up. But when you build your retirement around resilience instead of just returns, those cracks don't spread. They're absorbed, managed, contained. And that's what creates confidence, not certainty, not perfection, but confidence, the kind that allows you to move through retirement without constantly second guessing yourself, without feeling like every decision carries enormous risk, without living at the mercy of markets, headlines, or unexpected events, because you've built something stronger than a portfolio. You've built a system. If there's one idea I want you to walk away with, it's this. Retirement is not a finish line. It's a transition into a new kind of responsibility. Not the responsibility of earning, but the responsibility of protecting, managing, and experiencing what you've built. And the people who do this best, they don't just focus on growth, they focus on structure, they focus on flexibility, they focus on durability. Because at this stage of life, success isn't about having the most. It's about needing the least amount of correction along the way. It's about creating a life that feels stable, even when the world isn't. And that's exactly what these 6 assets are designed to do. So if you're stepping into retirement or even approaching it, don't just ask yourself, am I invested correctly? Ask yourself something deeper. Have I built a retirement that can handle real life? Because when you do, retirement doesn't just work, it feels right.